I accidentally saw everyone's salaries. The junior engineer I trained last month, he's making $63,000 more than me. After 10 years here is how it started. The email sat in my inbox like a ticking bomb. Subject line Q4 compensation analysis confidential. I shouldn't have been able to see it. Nobody in my department should have. That someone in HR, probably stressed and overworked like the rest of us, had clicked reply all instead of forwarding it solely to the executive team. Now, here it was, glowing on my screen at 6:47 a.m. before most people had even arrived at the office. My coffee went cold in my hand as I opened the attachment. The spreadsheet loaded slowly, row by agonizing row, names, titles, hire dates, base salaries. My AS scanned automatically, the way they'd been trained to do after a decade of analyzing financial data for Vertex Technologies. Then I saw it. Brandon Ellis, software engineer 2, hired 14 months ago. Base salary $142,000. I blinked, certain I'd misread. Scrolled up. I looked again. 142,000, my throat tightened. I kept scrolling. Zoe Harmon, software engineer 2, hired 9 months ago. Base salary $138,500. Derek Hammond, software engineer 2, hired 11 months ago. Base salary $145,000. Every single one of them. Every person I'd trained in the past 2 years. Every junior engineer who still asked me basic questions about our code base, our deployment procedures, our client requirements. They were all making between $135,000 and $150,000. My hands were shaking as I scrolled to find my own name. It took longer than it should have. The list was organized by salary, highest to lowest, and I had to go down. Way down, page 4. Ruby Mitchell, senior software engineer, 10 years at the company. Base salary, $87,000. $87,000. 10 years, a decade of 60-hour weeks, of being the person everyone called when systems crashed at midnight, of building the architecture that powered 70% of our revenue-generating products, of mentoring every new hire who walked through the door. $87,000. They were paying people I'd trained personally almost $60,000 more than me, some of them $63,000 more to be exact. People who'd been here less than a year were earning nearly double what I made. The office sounds around me seemed to fade into white noise. The espresso machine hissing in the break room, keyboards clicking, someone laughing at a video playing too loudly through their headphones. Everything felt distant underwater. I looked across the open floor plan to where Brandon sat, headphones on, nodding along to music while typing lazily at his keyboard. Brandon, who just last week had asked me how to handle a merge conflict in Git. Brandon, who was making $55,000 more than me annually. My chest felt tight. Not with sadness, not even with anger yet, just a cold, crystallizing clarity. The recall notice came through 7 minutes later. All caps marked urgent. Please disregard previous email and delete all attachments immediately. Sent an error. I'd already downloaded the file to 3 separate locations. My personal laptop, a cloud drive under a throwaway email, a USB drive I kept in my desk for emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. I closed my laptop with deliberate calm, stood up, and walked straight to the corner office where my manager, Colin Reeves, was just settling in with his breakfast burrito. Ruby. He looked up, surprised. I never just dropped in without scheduling. What's up? I sat down without being invited and opened my laptop, turning it to face him. The spreadsheet filled the screen. I need you to explain this to me. Colin's eyes went to the screen. I watched his expression shift. Recognition, then something that looked almost like guilt. Then practice neutrality. The manager mask sliding into place. Ruby, you know I can't discuss other employees' compensation. I'm not asking about theirs. I'm asking about mine. My voice was steady, controlled. 10 years, Colin. I've been here since we had 43 employees working out of that cramped space above the sandwich shop. I built half our core infrastructure. I've trained every engineer hired in the past 5 years. How is it possible that people with less than 2 years of experience are making $60,000 more than me? He set down his burrito, wiping his hands on a napkin. Stalling. The market has changed significantly, Ruby. Tech salaries have exploded in recent years. When we hired you in 2013, the compensation landscape was completely different. We have to stay competitive with current market rates for new talent, then adjust mine to match. It's not that simple. There are salary bands, budget cycles, equity considerations. I almost laughed. I have 0.03% equity that's been diluted 4 times. Brandon has more than I do, and he's been here barely a year. Colin shifted in his chair. Look, I understand you're upset. I can submit a request for an off-cycle adjustment, but I have to be honest with you. It's unlikely to be approved right now. We just completed annual reviews last month. You got your raise? 3%. I got 3%. That's $2,610 annually. The cost of living in Seattle went up 4% last year alone. Ruby. His tone shifted to that particularly condescending frequency managers use when they want you to feel like you're being unreasonable. I appreciate everything you've contributed to this company. You're a valued team member, but these are the realities of running a business. I can't just manufacture budget out of thin air. But you can manufacture $145,000 for a junior engineer. That's different. That's acquisition cost. We have to compete for new talent, and you don't have to compete to retain your most experienced engineer, the one who actually keeps this place running. Colin's jaw tightened. Is there anything else? I have aligned with the product team. I stood up slowly, gathering my laptop. No, that's all I needed to hear. Ruby, don't do anything rash. Let me put in the adjustment request. Don't bother. I walked back to my desk on legs that felt oddly steady despite everything inside me screaming. Around me, the office was filling up with the usual morning energy. People grabbing coffee, chatting about their weekends, settling into their ergonomic chairs and adjustable standing desks. I sat down and opened a blank document. Let me tell you a bit about myself before I go any further. I'm Ruby Mitchell, 34 years old. The kind of person who color codes her calendar and keeps her kitchen spices alphabetized, not because of some quirky personality trait, but because I genuinely believe systems make life better. Organization creates efficiency. Efficiency creates results. That same principle made me exceptional at my job. I didn't just write code. I architected systems that scaled. I anticipated problems 3 steps ahead. I documented everything meticulously because I understood that institutional knowledge was power. And now, for the first time in my career, I was going to wield that power for myself. Before I dive into what happened next, I need to pause and ask you something. Could you take just a second to drop a comment telling me where you're watching from? I genuinely want to know my story reached you wherever you are. And if you've ever felt undervalued at work, maybe leave a heart or hit that like button because what I'm about to tell you might just inspire you to stand up for yourself too. So there I was, sitting at my desk in an office that suddenly felt foreign despite a decade of familiarity. I pulled up a fresh spreadsheet and started typing. The true cost of Ruby Mitchell, a comprehensive analysis. I worked through my lunch break, then through the afternoon. By the time most people were logging off for the day, I was just getting started. I began with a timeline. Every major project I'd led, every crisis I'd resolved, every system I'd built that became foundational to the company's infrastructure. 2013 hired as junior developer rebuilt, the entire deployment pipeline reducing. Release time from 6 hours to 45 minutes, saved approximately 100 to 200 developer hours annually 2014. Promoted to software engineer 2, created the automated testing framework that caught 73% of bugs before production, estimated value $380,000 in prevented downtime and customer churn. 2015 led migration to microservices architecture. Project completed 3 months early, enabling the company to onboard 3 major enterprise clients ahead of schedule. Revenue impact $2.1 million 2016. Designed and implemented the real-time analytics system that became our flagship product feature. This system now processes 14 million events daily and is cited in 80% of our sales materials as a key differentiator. I kept going hour after hour. Every accomplishment, every innovation, every weekend spent debugging critical issues while everyone else was out living their lives. By the time I looked up, it was past 11 p.m. The office was empty except for the night security guard making his rounds. My document had grown to 58 pages. But I wasn't done. I opened a new sheet and started calculating the actual dollar value I'd brought to the company. Conservative estimates only, client revenue from systems I'd built, cost savings from efficiency improvements, the value of preventing major outages, the expenses avoided by having someone who understood every corner of our infrastructure. The number I arrived at made my stomach flip. $4.7 million in measurable value over the past 3 years alone. I compared that to the salary adjustment I'd need to reach market rate, $58,000 annually. The math was almost insulting. I went home at midnight, showered, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. My mind was racing through possibilities, angles, approaches. By the time dawn light started filtering through my blinds, I had a plan. I got up, made coffee, and got dressed with more care than I'd taken in months. Navy blazer, white blouse, my good boots. When you're about to change everything, you dress for it. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m. Earlier than anyone except the CEO, Elliot Walsh. I'd timed this deliberately. I knew his routine. Elliot arrived at 6:45 every morning, made himself tea in the executive kitchen, and spent the first hour before meetings reviewing reports in his office. I knocked on his door at exactly 7:10. Come in. He looked up from his laptop, surprised to see me. At 51, Elliot had the silver fox look of tech executives who'd made their fortune young and aged into gravitas. Ruby, early morning for you. I need 10 minutes of your time. Something in my tone made him close his laptop. Sit. I placed 3 items on his desk. My 58-page analysis printed and professionally bound at a 24-hour copy shop, a formal resignation letter, and a written offer from one of our direct competitors, Northcrest Solutions, offering me $165,000 plus equity and benefits. Elliot's eyes moved across the items. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. I'm listening. I've spent the past 18 hours documenting my contributions to this company. That's the summary. I tapped the bound document. The short version is that I've brought measurable value of $7 million over the past 3 years while being compensated at roughly 60% of market rate. Yesterday, I discovered that engineers I personally trained with less than 2 years of experience are making up to $63,000 more than me annually. Elliot picked up the document and began flipping through it. His face remained carefully neutral. When I raised this with Colin, I was told it's a matter of market rates for new acquisitions, that my compensation was set in a different economic environment, that off-cycle adjustments are unlikely. I paused. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to inform you that I'm accepting the offer from Northwest Solutions. My resignation is effective in 2 weeks. Northwest Solutions. Elliot sat down the document. Justin Ward's company. Yes, they're our direct competitor for the enterprise analytics market. I'm aware, Ruby. He leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk. I understand you're frustrated. This spreadsheet leak was unfortunate, and I apologize that you had to find out about compensation disparities that way, but you have to understand the business realities. We pay market rate to acquire talent. Retention economics work differently. Then you're choosing to accept a 60% discount on your most experienced engineer while paying a premium for unproven talent. That's not a business reality. That's a business mistake. What do you want? I don't want anything anymore. I wanted fair compensation for the past 10 years. That ship has sailed. I stood up. What I'm offering you is 2 weeks of knowledge transfer. Given the complexity of the systems I've built, you actually need at least 90 days for a proper transition. 2 weeks is what you'll get unless you convince me otherwise. We could match Northwest's offer. You could have matched market rate at any point in the past decade. You chose not to. Elliot's expression hardened. You're making an emotional decision, Ruby. I'd encourage you to think carefully before burning bridges. I've done nothing but think carefully for 10 years while being systematically undervalued. I'm done thinking. I'm acting. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. The final section of my analysis contains detailed documentation of every system process and architectural decision I've made, every password, every vendor relationship, every workaround for the technical debt we've accumulated. Consider it a roadmap for whoever tries to fill my shoes. I walked out before he could respond. My desk suddenly felt different. The same ergonomic chair, the same dual monitors, the same succulents I'd been keeping alive for 6 years. But everything had shifted. I wasn't Ruby, the reliable senior engineer anymore. I was Ruby, who just dropped a bomb on the CEO's desk before 7:30 a.m. My phone buzzed. A text from Justin Ward at Northwest Solutions. Have you made your decision? I typed back. Yes, I accept your offer. His response came immediately. Excellent. When can you start? 4 weeks. I'm giving them 2 weeks' notice, then taking 2 weeks off. You've earned it. Welcome to Northwest, Ruby. We're going to do great things together. I set my phone down and stared at my screen. The codebase I'd built over 10 years stared back at me. Hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Architectural patterns that had become standards. Systems that processed millions of transactions daily. All of it about to become someone else's problem. By 9 a.m., word had spread. I could feel it in the way people looked at me. Colin had obviously told someone who told someone else. And now the Whisper network was doing its thing. Brandon walked past my desk 3 times, clearly wanting to say something, but not quite daring to. At 10:15, my calendar pinged with a meeting invitation. Discussion, Elliot's office. Attendees, Elliot Walsh, Colin Reeves, Elise Price, COO, Raymond Oakes, CFO, the executive team, all of them. I accepted the meeting and went back to documenting system dependencies. When I walked into Elliot's office at 11, all 4 of them were already there. Elise gestured to the empty chair across from them. The setup was deliberate, them on one side, me on the other. Ruby, thanks for joining us. Elise spoke first. At 46, she had the polished competence of someone who'd climbed the corporate ladder through sheer strategic thinking. We've been discussing your resignation, and we'd like to present a counteroffer. I'm listening. Raymond slid a folder across the table. We're prepared to offer you a salary adjustment to $155,000 effective immediately, a one-time retention bonus of $40,000, promotion to principal engineer with a seat on the Technical Leadership Council, and an additional equity grant of 0.02%. I opened the folder and read the offer letter carefully. They'd actually put it in writing. Everything Raymond had listed, plus benefits, enhancements, and a dedicated budget for professional development. It was more than generous. It was everything I would have accepted eagerly if they'd offered it 3 months ago. 6 months ago? Anytime in the past 3 years? This is a strong offer, I said finally. Relief flickered across Colin's face, but I'm declining it. The relief vanished. Ruby, be reasonable. Elliot leaned forward. This brings you above market rate. It addresses everything you raised this morning. It addresses my salary. It doesn't address 10 years of being undervalued. It doesn't address the fundamental disrespect of paying newcomers $60,000 more than me while I train them. It doesn't address the fact that you only made this offer after I resigned. We're trying to make it right, Elise said. You're trying to avoid the consequences of making it wrong for a decade. I closed the folder. If I'd stayed quiet, if I hadn't seen that spreadsheet, if I hadn't come to Elliot this morning, would you have offered me this adjustment? Silence. That's what I thought. I stood up. Appreciate the offer. Truly. But I've accepted the position at Northwest Solutions. My 2 weeks' notice stands. Ruby. Raymond's voice had an edge now. I hope you understand that leaving for a direct competitor may have legal implications. You signed a non-compete agreement. I'd been waiting for this. I reviewed my employment contract last night with an attorney. The non-compete clause is unenforceable in Washington state as of January 2020. New legislation prohibits non-competes for employees making less than $116,593.18 annually. My current salary is $87,000. Even your counteroffer is only marginally above the threshold. And since I'm not accepting it, the non-compete doesn't apply. Raymond's jaw tightened. He clearly hadn't expected me to have legal counsel ready. Additionally, I continued, I have no intention of taking proprietary code or client lists. I will, however, be taking the skills and knowledge I've developed over 10 years of experience. That's mine. You don't get to underpay me for a decade and then claim ownership of my professional growth. I walked to the door, then turned back. You have 2 weeks to extract as much institutional knowledge as possible. I suggest you use them wisely. The next 13 days were fascinating. Suddenly, I was invited to meetings I'd never been included in before. Executive strategy sessions, architecture planning, product roadmap discussions. People who'd barely acknowledged me in the hallway were stopping by my desk, asking questions, wanting to pick my brain about systems I'd built years ago. Colin scheduled daily check-ins. Elise took me to lunch. Even Elliot stopped by my desk twice, asking casual questions about upcoming projects that were anything but casual. They were panicking. On day 4, Brandon approached my desk looking uncomfortable. Hey, Ruby, can I ask you something? Sure. Is it true you're leaving because of the salary stuff? I looked at him directly. Yes. He shifted his weight. I didn't know. I didn't know what you were making. If I'd known, it wouldn't have changed anything. Brandon, you didn't set your salary? Neither did I, but I'm done accepting less than I'm worth. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, you've been the best mentor I've ever had. I wouldn't know half of what I know without you. I appreciate that. Northwest is lucky to get you. After he left, 3 other people came by with similar sentiments. By the end of the day, my desk had accumulated a small pile of handwritten notes from colleagues. Some apologizing, some thanking me. Some asked if Northwest was hiring. That last part was interesting. On day 7, Colin called me into a conference room. Ruby, I need to be straight with you. We're struggling Toplin for your departure. The knowledge transfer document you provided is comprehensive, but there's too much for 2 weeks. We need more time. I gave you a roadmap, follow it. It's not that simple. Half of these systems don't have sufficient documentation. You're the only person who understands how they work end to end. Then you should have documented them properly or paid me to do it. We're willing to offer you a consulting arrangement. After your 2 weeks, continue to be available for questions. We'll pay $250 per hour. I did quick math. $250 per hour for what would inevitably be constant calls and emails. They were trying to keep me on a leash. No thanks, Ruby. Call and let me explain something to you. For 10 years, I made myself indispensable to this company. He was available at midnight for emergencies. I worked weekends. I trained every new hire. I built systems no one else understood. I did all of that because I believed loyalty would be rewarded. It wasn't. I leaned forward. So now you're discovering the cost of my absence. That cost is significantly higher than the $60,000 you refused to pay me. This is a lesson you're going to learn the hard way. On day 10, something interesting happened. I received an email from someone I didn't recognize. Jennifer Hartley, senior engineer at a company called Divergent Technologies. The subject line read, "Saw your name come up." The email was brief. "Hi, Ruby. I heard through the grapevine that you're leaving Vertex Tech. I worked there 3 years ago and left for similar reasons. Just wanted to reach out and say good for you. If you ever want to compare notes about Elliot's management style, I'm happy to grab coffee. Also, I have some information that might interest you. Call me." She included her phone number. I called her during my lunch break. "Ruby, thanks for calling." Jennifer's voice was warm, energetic. "I've been waiting for someone to finally tell Elliot to shove it. How did you hear about my resignation? Tech community in Seattle is smaller than you think. Plus, I still have friends at Vertex who keep me updated." She paused. "Look, I'm going to be direct. When I left Vertex 3 years ago, it was because I discovered the same thing you did. Massive pay disparities, new hires making way more than longtime employees. I tried to negotiate, got stonewalled, left for a competitor. Sounds familiar? Here's what you don't know yet. After I left, Vertex tried to sue me for breach of contract. They claimed I violated my non-compete by going to a competitor. Spent 6 months in legal hell before a judge threw it out. Cost me $20,000 in attorney fees. My stomach dropped. They're going to swim. Maybe. Probably not, since you've clearly done your homework on the non-compete angle. But here's the more interesting part." Her voice lowered. "When my attorney did discovery during the lawsuit, we uncovered some stuff. Financial stuff. Irregularities in how they were managing compensation budgets." "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind where the money allocated for employee raises mysteriously didn't match the actual raises given. The kind where executive bonuses seemed inversely proportional to employee compensation growth. I couldn't prove anything definitive before we settled, but it smelled wrong. Do you still have the documents?" "I have some under NDA technically, but there are ways around that if you know where to look." She paused. "Why you thinking what I'm thinking?" "I was thinking a lot of things. I'm not sure yet, but I'd like to see what you have. Come by my office tomorrow. I'll show you what I kept." That evening, I couldn't focus on my transition documentation. My mind kept circling back to what Jennifer had said. Financial irregularities, compensation budgets not matching actual raises, executive bonuses. I opened my laptop and started digging through files I'd accumulated over 10 years. As a senior engineer with infrastructure access, I'd had visibility into various systems, including peripherally some financial reporting tools. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just patterns, anomalies, things that didn't quite add up. It took 3 hours, but I found it. Vertex Technologies had a standard practice of allocating 3 to 5% annual budget increases for employee compensation. This was documented in board reports, investor updates, and internal financial projections. The money was earmarked, approved, and supposedly distributed. But when I compared the allocated amounts to the actual salary increases given over the past 5 years, there was a gap. A significant gap. In 2019, the company allocated $2.1 million for compensation adjustments. Actual increases distributed $1.4 million difference. $700,000 in 2020, $2.3 million allocated $1.5 million distributed difference. $800,000 in 2021, $2.66 million allocated, $1.7 million distributed. Difference $900,000, the pattern continued. Each year, millions of dollars were allocated for employee compensation, but never actually reached employee paychecks. Where was the money going? I cross-referenced with executive compensation disclosures that were part of our public benefit corporation filings. Elliot's total compensation had increased by 34% over the same period, Elise's by 29%, Raymond's by 31%. The picture was becoming clear. Money budgeted for employee raises was being reallocated to executive bonuses and perks. They were literally taking money meant for us and giving it to themselves. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. This was bigger than salary disparities. This was potential fraud. At minimum, it was a massive betrayal of fiduciary duty to employees. And I had documentation. The next morning, I met Jennifer at a coffee shop near her office in Fremont. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with blue streaks in her dark hair and an intensity that reminded me of myself 5 years ago. She slid a folder across the table. Everything I could keep without technically violating the NDA, financial reports, email exchanges, board meeting notes my friend on the admin team sent me. I flipped through the documents. They corroborated what I'd found. Budget allocations that disappeared. Executive compensation that ballooned while employee raises stagnated. This is the same pattern I found. I said they're doing it systematically. Have been for years, probably. Jennifer sipped her latte. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know yet. My advice, burn it down. Not literally, obviously, but expose it. They did this to you, to me, probably to dozens of others. Companies like Vertex only change when they're forced to. I thought about that as I drove back to the office for my final days. Burn it down. It was tempting. Deeply tempting, but I needed to be smart about it. On day 13, Colin scheduled my exit interview with Elise from HR and Raymond from finance. Standard procedure, they said, just a formality. I came prepared. We sat in a small conference room. Elise with her standard HR smile. Raymond looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. So Ruby, let's start with the basics. Elise clicked her pen. Can you tell us about your experience at Vertex Technologies? It's been educational. We're sorry to see you go. What was the primary factor in your decision to leave? Compensation and equity. Raymond shifted. As we discussed, we made a competitive counteroffer, which I declined. I pulled out my laptop. Actually, I'm glad you're both here. I've been reviewing some financial data over the past few days, and I have some questions. I turned the screen to face them. Spreadsheets, budget allocations versus actual compensation increases. Can you explain why, over the past 5 years, Vertex has consistently allocated 3 to 5% budget increases for employee compensation, but actual salary increases have averaged 2 to 2.5%? Raymond's face went carefully blank. I'm not sure where you're getting those numbers. Board reports, investor updates, internal financial projections, all documents I had access to as a senior engineer with infrastructure permissions. I clicked to the next sheet. The gap between allocated and distributed compensation totals, approximately $4.2 million over 5 years. Where did that money go? Elise's pen had stopped moving. During the same period, executive compensation increased by an average of 31%. That's an interesting correlation. Ruby Raymond's voice had an edge. You're making some serious allegations. I'm asking questions in my exit interview, which is exactly the appropriate forum for discussing concerns about company practices. I smiled pleasantly. So where did the money go? Compensation allocation is complex, Raymond said carefully. There are various factors. Market adjustments, role changes, budget reallocations for business needs. So you're saying the money allocated specifically for employee raises was reallocated away from employees? That's not what I said. Then what are you saying? Silence. Elise cleared her throat. Ruby, I think we're getting off track here. This exit interview is meant to be constructive. I'm being very constructive. I'm trying to understand why I was paid $60,000 less than market rate, while the company allegedly couldn't afford to give meaningful raises despite allocating millions for that exact purpose. I closed my laptop. Here's what I think happened. I think Vertex has been systematically underpaying long-term employees while telling them there's no budget for raises. Meanwhile, that budget money gets quietly reallocated to executive compensation and new hire acquisition costs. It's a shell game, and I can prove it. Raymond stood up. This meeting is over. We still have 10 minutes scheduled. I said we're done. He looked at Elise. Get legal on the phone now. I gathered my laptop calmly. I'll be at my desk finishing my transition documentation if you need me. That afternoon, I received an email from Vertex's legal counsel, Arthur Peaton. Subject, confidentiality obligations. The email was a thinly veiled threat, reminding me of my confidentiality agreements. noting that unauthorized disclosure of company financial information could result in legal action, suggesting that any false or misleading statements about the company could constitute defamation. I forwarded it to my personal attorney with a note. Thoughts? Her response came an hour later. They're scared. Don't post anything publicly yet, but this actually strengthens your position if they try anything. Keep documenting everything. Day 14, my last day at Vertex Technologies. I arrived at 8 a.m. to find a cardboard box on my desk. HR had thoughtfully provided me with packing materials. How considerate. I spent the morning boxing up my belongings. 10 years condensed into 2 cubic feet of personal items. Photos from team events, a mug my first intern had given me, the little succulent plants, my backup keyboard. People stopped by all morning, some to say goodbye, some to awkwardly avoid eye contact. Brandon came by with a card signed by the entire engineering team. "We're going to miss you," he said. "And honestly, we're kind of screwed without you. You'll figure it out, will we, though?" He looked genuinely concerned. There's already talk about delays on the Watson project because no one else knows the inventory system well enough. Then I guess they'll need to hire someone who does at market rate. At 3:00 p.m., I logged out of all my accounts, surrendered my keycard and laptop, and carried my box through the office one last time. The elevator ride down felt surreal. 10 years ending with a cardboard box and a lot of unanswered questions. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from an unknown number. "Is this Ruby Mitchell?" "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Claire Donovan. I'm an investigative journalist with the Seattle Business Journal. I heard you recently left Vertex Technologies. I'm working on a story about compensation practices in Seattle tech companies. Any chance you'd be willing to talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then I typed, "Yes, let's meet." Claire Donovan was exactly what I expected an investigative journalist to be. Sharp eyes, quick questions, a recorder that she asked permission to use. We met at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill the next morning. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. I walked her through the spreadsheet leak, the salary disparities, the failed negotiation with Colin, my resignation, the counter-offer I'd rejected, and then carefully I showed her the financial data I'd compiled. Budget allocations versus actual compensation, executive pay increases, the missing millions. Claire's eyes got wider with each document. "This is incredible," she said finally. "Do you realize what you have here? A potential lawsuit waiting to happen if I go public. Maybe, but also a major story about a systemic problem in the tech industry." She leaned forward. "Look, I've been investigating compensation inequity for months. I've talked to dozens of people who've experienced similar things, but no one has had the documentation you have. No one has been able to prove the systemic nature of it. What are you proposing? Let me write the story. I'll verify everything independently. I'll talk to other former Vertex employees. I'll request comment from the company, and I'll protect you as a source to the extent you want. They'll know it's me, maybe, probably. But if the financial data checks out, it won't matter. The story will be about the practices, not about you specifically. I thought about it, about 10 years of being undervalued, about all the other Averys at other companies going through the same thing, about the money that could have changed my life, paid off student loans, allowed me to buy a house, sitting instead in executive bonus pools. "Do it," I said. "Write the story." Claire's article published 3 weeks later, right as I was starting my second week at Northcrest Solutions. The headline read, "Seattle Tech darling Vertex Technologies faces allegations of systematic compensation inequity and financial mismanagement." The article was devastating. Claire had done her homework. She'd interviewed 8 former employees who corroborated similar experiences. She'd gotten economists to analyze the budget discrepancies I documented. She'd filed public records requests for corporate filings that showed executive compensation growth outpacing revenue growth by 3-to-1. And she'd gotten Elliot Walsh on record giving a defensive, tone-deaf response about competitive market dynamics and complex compensation structures that only made him look worse. The story went viral within hours. Tech Twitter exploded. Reddit threads dissected every detail. Other journalists started reaching out to former Vertex employees. Local news picked it up. Then national outlets. By day 2, there was a Change.org petition calling for Elliot's resignation with 15,000 signatures. By day 3, current Vertex employees were organizing a walkout. By day 4, the company's investors had called an emergency board meeting. I watched it all unfold from my new desk at Northcrest Solutions in an office, with actual windows and a salary that reflected my worth. Justin Ward stopped by on the third day of the media firestorm. How are you holding up? Honestly, better than I expected. Elliot's lawyer sent us a letter threatening to sue if we hired anyone else from Vertex. I told them to get lost. He grinned. Your former colleagues are calling me daily asking about openings. Are you hiring for the right people? I assume you can vouch for some of them. I thought about Brandon, about Zoe, about the handful of engineers at Vertex who'd been kind during my final days. I can send my names. We're about to poach half their engineering team. That's exactly what happened over the next 2 months. Brandon gave notice first, followed by 3 others from my old team, then people from the product, then from design. It became an exodus. Vertex went into crisis mode. They announced an immediate compensation review. They hired an outside firm to audit their financial practices. They placed Raymond on administrative leave pending investigation. Elise resigned, releasing a statement about pursuing other opportunities that fooled no one. But Elliot held on, at least initially. He gave interviews claiming the allegations were overblown. He promised reforms. He said all the right things about transparency and equity. It didn't matter. The damage was done. By month 3, Vertex had lost 30% of its workforce. 2 major clients switched to competitors, citing concerns about organizational stability. Their valuation dropped by 40%. The board finally forced Elliot out in week 16. He left with a golden parachute that probably should have been divided among the employees he'd underpaid. But that's corporate America for you. Meanwhile, I was thriving at North Crest. Justin gave me free rein to build the engineering team I'd always wanted. We hired people at fair market rates from day one. We implemented transparent salary bands that anyone could view. We created a policy requiring compensation reviews anytime market rates shifted significantly. I personally reviewed every offer to ensure we weren't replicating the mistakes that had defined my last decade. Months after I left Vertex, Claire published a follow-up article, The Aftermath, How One Engineer's Resignation Sparked Industry-Wide Compensation Reform. She interviewed me this time on the record. Do you have any regrets? She asked. I thought about it carefully. I regret that it took me 10 years to stand up for myself. I regret that I needed a spreadsheet leaked by mistake to realize my worth, but I don't regret leaving. And I don't regret going public. Your former employer has called you vindictive, accused you of sabotage. How do you respond? I didn't sabotage anything. I documented facts. I asked questions they couldn't answer. If the truth is devastating to your business model, maybe your business model was the problem. The article quoted that line in the headline. 1 year after my resignation, I got an unexpected email from elliot.walsh@personal@gmail.com. Subject, an apology long overdue. Ruby, I doubt you want to hear from me, and I wouldn't blame you for deleting this without reading. But I've been thinking a lot over the past year about what happened, and I owe you an apology. You're right about all of it. The compensation disparities, the budget mismanagement, the way we treated long-term employees. I told myself we were just operating within normal business parameters. But the truth is, we were taking advantage of people's loyalty. Your loyalty especially. I know my apology doesn't change anything. It doesn't give you back 10 years of fair pay. It doesn't undo the stress and frustration you experienced. But I wanted you to know that I've learned from this the hard way. Clearly, I'm working with a startup now, much smaller, and I'm trying to do things differently. Transparent compensation from day one. Regular equity reviews. Actually listening when people raise concerns. I hope you're doing well. Based on what I hear through the industry grapevine, you're crushing it at North Crest. They're lucky to have you. We were too, but we were too stupid to realize it until it was too late. Elliot, I read the email 3 times. It was tempting to respond with something cutting, something that would make him feel a fraction of what I'd felt that morning discovering the pay gap. But I realized I didn't need to. He already knew. The entire industry knew. His career would forever be marked by this. I deleted the email without responding. Some things don't deserve your energy. Another 6 months passed. North Crest Solutions continued to grow. We launched 2 major products that directly competed with Vertex's core offerings and won. The engineering team I'd built was phenomenal, smart, collaborative, properly compensated. Then something interesting happened. Vertex Technologies was acquired by a larger firm at a fraction of its former value. The acquiring company immediately announced layoffs. Within weeks, dozens of my former colleagues were on the job market. My phone started ringing. Ruby, it's Colin. I know I have no right to ask, but is North Crest hiring? That was a surreal conversation. My former manager, who told me salary adjustments were not that simple, asking me for a job. We are, I said carefully. But I should tell you up front, our compensation is transparent. Everyone can see what everyone else makes. And we don't tolerate the kind of management practices that were standard at Vertex. There was a long pause. I understand. I deserve that. But I've learned from what happened. I should have fought harder for you and others. I didn't, and I've had to live with that. Send me your resume, I said finally. I can't promise anything, but I'll pass it to our recruiting team. I didn't hire Colin, but I did bring on 5 former Vertex colleagues, including Brandon, who'd grown into a strong engineer and was absolutely worth the senior salary we offered. 2 years after my resignation, I spoke at a tech conference on pay equity. The room was packed. Afterward, people lined up to share their own stories of being undervalued, especially one woman in her late 40s. I've been here 17 years, she said quietly. People I trained are making almost twice what I do. I'm scared to speak up. I'm close to retirement. I spent 30 minutes sketching out a framework with her. How to document impact, negotiate, and know when to walk away. The same process that saved me. She left with tears in her eyes and a plan in hand. That moment crystallized it for me. This wasn't just about me or Vertex. It was a systemic issue affecting thousands, especially women and minorities told to be grateful for scraps. So I started writing blog posts, articles, my value tracking spreadsheet, negotiation tactics, legal insights on non-competes. The response flooded in. People used my tools to secure raises, escape toxic workplaces, and finally stand up for themselves. Some stories broke my heart. Others inspired me. All mattered. By year 3, I was VP of Engineering at North Crest, leading 60 engineers and earning triple what Vertex paid me. But the real win wasn't my salary. It was the 42 people who told me they'd negotiated better pay after reading my story. The 18 companies that adopted transparent salary bands. The 6 states that passed pay transparency laws, partly thanks to the coverage. One evening, a LinkedIn message popped up. My daughter just graduated. They offered her $65,000. She used your framework and negotiated $95,000. Thank you for teaching her her worth before she wasted a decade like you did. I read it 3 times. That was the point. Not revenge. Not justice, but prevention empowerment. My story had a happy ending, but the real victory was bigger. Every person who saw what happened to me and chose not to let it happen to them. Every company that realized undervaluing loyalty has a cost. 4 years after walking out with a cardboard box, Vert.x settled a class action wage theft lawsuit. $8.7 million split among 247 employees. My share, $47,382. Not enough to undo 10 years, but something. I donated it to a nonprofit offering negotiation training for women in tech. Because in the end, the most powerful thing I did wasn't exposing Vertex or poaching their talent. It was refusing to stay quiet, choosing my worth over their comfort, telling my truth, even when it was risky. Some called me brave, others vindictive. I didn't care. What mattered was the woman at the conference, the new grad who negotiated confidently, the engineers who left toxic jobs knowing they'd land on their feet. This isn't about salary figures or corporate drama. It's about knowing your value and refusing to accept less, no matter how long you've tolerated it. So if you're watching this and feeling undervalued, document everything. Know your worth. Ask for what you deserve. And if they say no, be ready to walk away, because the most beautifully brutal thing you can do is refuse to be undervalued. That's power no one can take from you. If this resonated, drop a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Somewhere right now, someone's staring at a spreadsheet that says they're worth 40% less than they are. Let them know your worth isn't what they'll pay you. It's what you're willing to accept. I'm Ruby Mitchell. I was undervalued for 10 years. Then I decided I wasn't anymore. That decision changed everything. Your turn.